Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of The Path Less Chosen, the podcast showing the careers they don't teach you in school. My name's Sol.
I'm Jamie.
And this week's episode is with Nathan Chatelier, who is a professional voiceover artist. He has a background in acting, but he's now done audiobooks, commercials, video games, and has worked with some major brands like the Red Cross, Viagogo, Lipton Ice Tea, Visa, and loads more. Absolutely no idea about a voiceover artist, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, there's actually quite a lot of work and interesting stuff for that, but quite keen to delve into a career of someone who's really going full time on it. So yeah, Jamie, thoughts?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, some of the projects that he's working on are going to be quite interesting to speak about, but it's one of those ones where I just hear it and I think, oh, he must have a really nice sounding voice. But from the brief summary we've got of him so far, I know there's actually a lot more that goes into it than that. So for anyone who thinks they've got a nice sounding voice and could maybe make some money out of their voice, then this is probably a useful one to listen to. So I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, let's get him on. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us. Very appreciative of you coming on. You could just give us a little brief overview of what you're actually up to right now.
Yeah, so the projects I do completely vary from day to day. This morning, just before we started talking, I was working on a learning educational program for people who work on the train lines. Then this afternoon, I'm going to be moving on to this non-fiction audiobook I'm doing called The Ideas That Shape Us, also by a guy called Nathan Murphy. Really lovely guy, really good book. And then later today I'm going to be finishing off putting the final touches on a video game trailer. So it's jumping across sort of all genres and all different performance styles from day to day. So I never quite know what I'm going to be up to from moment to moment.
I think most people listening will probably have been shocked by your microphone quality straight away, and they'll think, okay, this guy sounds pretty good. And I think there's a reason for that. So when you're talking about working on all of these different projects today, explain a little bit about what exactly it is you're doing on them. So how does it work in terms of recording a voiceover as a voiceover artist for things like video games and audiobooks?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the audiobook I'm doing is a pretty good example because that's about 10 hours of content that I need to record. So the way that you normally go about that is you'll either approach the author and cheekily say, hey, I've got a great voice, can I work on your project? Or they'll get in touch with you somehow. And then you essentially find a midway of what is the voice they're looking for and how do they conceptualize their project and how do they want that brought to life with the narration. Because, for example, if you look at TV ads now compared to TV ads, say, 30 or 40 years ago, there's a massive difference in the way that the voice is used. Back in the good old days, you had something called the Voice of God announcement, which I'm sure people are familiar with, which is the kind of classic movie voice trailer of, in a world, where the voice was really very front and center of the advertisement. But more modern day voiceover trends kind of lend themselves, especially with TV adverts, much more towards the voice just kind of being the little cherry on top of the advert. So it's all about finding where the voice sits within the scope of the whole project. Now within a commercial, there's loads of video and footage and, cuts and actors. But in something like an audiobook, it's just the voice. So a lot of the preparatory work is talking to the author or the project leader or the client and finding out exactly what their vocal vision is. And that could be, you might send off a bunch of samples. They might say, here's someone who we think sounds great, that we've worked with before or we found online. And then it's tweaking until you've kind of fit the brand or the company's message. Because some companies are very colloquial and some companies are very formal. And after you've done enough, you tend to find that you can slip into a bit of a rhythm. You get a lot better at picking up a script and going, oh, I see what this is about. This is a formal/casual read, or this is a enthusiastic, warm read, or this is a cold, clinical, scientific read. So it's a question of collaboration between clients, and then sometimes the clients just hand over autonomy to you, and they kind of trust in your judgment to do that.
I guess that's something that you've learned over time from doing this and working in that industry for a while. But what is it about your voice specifically where when you pick up something like that and think, yeah, I'd be good for this, why your voice? Why would they select your voice? What makes your voice suitable for that role?
So I think one of the good things I have going for my voice is that I have the classic sort of RP, London-esque, universally understood accent. So a lot of the work I actually end up doing is for international clients, particularly countries where English is a second main language for that country. I've ended up with this accent that's generally quite easy to communicate with people across the world. So that's one of the nice things about it. And I've ended up doing quite a few meditations because my voice is a little bit on the lower side. Although, as I'm sure you guys have discovered, when you listen to your voice back, it's never quite as low as you thought it was. But yeah, I've got quite a smooth, crisp, versatile voice. And I'm also a professionally trained actor. So for stuff like video games or character animations or audiobooks that have lots of characters, I'm quite good at dipping into whether it's accents or different character traits or archetypes. I'm good at hopping in and out of those. Yeah. Got a broad international appeal.
One of the interesting things I picked up on there is you mentioned about like how we feel when we listen to our voices back. I think there's like a kind of generalization that most people listen to themselves back and think, oh, I don't like the sound of that, and like you end up cringing at your own voice. Do you struggle with that, the same kind of thing? Do you listen to your voice back and not like hearing it? Or because of what you do you get comfortable with listening to yourself back?
Yeah, I think it's changed. There's still a bit of reluctance to it. I think when I first started, it was very much, man, is that what everyone hears when I open my mouth? And then as I've done it more and more, it's moved more into a sort of a performance critique element, I think, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and especially compared to, say, stagecraft. I'm doing a play at the moment, and I love doing the theatre. I love being on the stage, and you form this very intimate connection with the audience, and there's no chance for second takes, you know? You do it, you get up, you perform, the play's over. Whereas with audio, you have the potential to endlessly tweak and cut and edit and review, and that's something that I find very, very appealing, but also something I sometimes get drawn into is just endlessly recording and re-recording, trying to hit what in my mind is, you know, the perfect read.
Amazing. And I can imagine if you get stuck down that rabbit hole of being perfectionist over a 10-hour audiobook, you could be sitting around for quite a long time, right? So I'd love to know, and I think so many listeners will have no idea of when you sit down and have to record all the things you spoke about, what does that actually look like in a very practical day-to-day sense?
Yeah, sure. So I don't actually sit down. When I first started doing it, I sat down. But I found that sitting down, it kind of restricts your body movement. Your breathing's not quite as good. There's a tendency, especially if you're doing something longer form like an audiobook or a training course, there's a bit of a tendency to slouch forward, and then that restricts your diaphragm and your vocal quality. So about 3 years ago, I switched to pretty much entirely standing. And it's amazing how much it grounds you and helps your performance. You know, when you're standing, you have such a good range of movement. There's always a tendency, because I read my scripts on my phone, right? So I'll be standing up in my booth. It's this lovely little 3x3x6 blanket booth that I built over the lockdown when I started doing voiceover. So it's got these lovely big blankets, which are great for blocking out sound, but awful in summers like this. I end up having to sort of ration myself to 20-minute recording sessions. I'll get the script through, I'll load it up on my phone, put on my LED lights, and then I'll walk into the booth. And then I've got my microphone, and then what you want to do is you want to position yourself to get the best sound out of the microphone. And then that varies depending on the project you're doing. I've got something called a shotgun microphone, which really picks up sound in a very specific area. And that's the classic kind of microphone they use for adverts. Because if you put your mouth really close to it when you start speaking, it creates this amazing kind of boomy presence to your voice that a lot of adverts like, or a lot of high energy sort of content likes. But then if you're doing something like audiobooks, then you'd use the microphone that I'm using for this podcast, and you'd go a little bit further back from it, because one of the things that can happen with being too close to a mic is it sounds awesome, you sound great, you sound really bassy and boomy, but it does wear the audience's ears down a little bit over time. So if I'm doing the longer form work, then I'll be standing there speaking into a microphone like this, which means I give it a little bit of distance, which is just easier on the audience ears, and it's a little bit of a smoother experience. And then the funnier side of things is how you record the mistakes, because we all make mistakes in the booth, and we all have different techniques. I know people that use something called a dog clicker. If anyone has a dog, they might be familiar with those. It makes this quite high-pitched kind of sort of sound. And that's a good way, because when you go back and look at the audio and you look at the waveform, there'll be these very quick spikes made by the dog clicker, which let you see where mistakes are, so you can edit them out. but I've always found a bit of trouble spotting them. So I tend to sort of make a bit of a, I can't believe I'm saying this, but a bit of a whale noise in the studio. So I'll normally go, so that when I go to edit the audio, there's just this big brick of audio that's very, very obviously a mistake.
I think that's something that we might have to start implementing for ourselves as well when there's plenty of mistakes. But I think the biggest takeaway from everything you've just said there is your attention to detail. That is like immense attention to detail. That's incredible. And I think most people would have thought, what goes into being a voiceover artist, you've got to have a nice voice, but no one quite realizes the thought you've given it in terms of like making sure you're stood up so your diaphragm's in the right position to speak at the right distance from a microphone. Is that an absolute like prerequisite then for this kind of career? Do you have to have that attention to detail?
Yeah, sitting, standing, it is whatever works for you, but attention to detail, absolutely. But there's so many variations within the industry. For example, in audiobooks, there are some very successful audiobook narrators who will have a unique voice and a unique rhythm, cadence, tempo for every single character that appears in the book. And then there are some really successful audiobook narrators who barely put on any voice at all for the characters and just read them as if they were reading descriptive text. So, what works for one person might be completely different for another. And it kind of harkens back to my acting training, where a lot of the time, what you really have to be specific about, and this is really, really important for things like commercial reads, is who is the audience that I'm trying to communicate this to? And what am I trying to do to the audience? What am I trying to make them feel? And it's so important to think about that, because especially when you're by yourself in a booth, it's really easy to just forget that someone is going to be listening to this on the other side. But it's just crucial to keep in mind that people will hear this, and what impact are you trying to have on them? And once you've figured that out, normally the rest follows a lot more smoothly.
I guess something that we keep covering with different guests on the podcast is getting a kind of work-life balance. And I think for the majority of people say, they try and just totally forget about work, but you're ultimately going to be talking outside of work, so it's pretty impossible for you to escape. Do you find that because you're analysing constantly how you're delivering certain things to certain people and what impact you're going to have on people, do you find yourself analysing how you talk just in normal life and an everyday conversation? Or can you detach yourself from when you're in a work environment and when you're in a sociable environment?
Gotta say, I think about work a lot. Not in a bad way, sometimes in a slightly stressed way, but I really enjoy my work. So I think about it a lot, when I'm out with friends, when I'm traveling on the tube, all that kind of thing. And it's definitely in my mind. I'm doing a play at the moment. So I'm constantly thinking about my voice, because it's a totally different thing, When you're in a booth, the only thing that can be heard or seen really is your voice. That's the only imprint that's there, compared to when you're on a stage trying to make sure that the person who's hard of hearing 15 rows back can hear you when you say every single line. They're completely different forms, but the skills that you need for them are so linked. And I catch myself when I'm talking to friends sometimes slipping into different voices, because you don't want to alter your voice too much when you're doing a narration read, because ultimately people want your voice. They don't want to hear, you trying to be someone else necessarily. But I definitely find myself sometimes slipping into a bit of a... Sometimes I'll get a bit commercially when I'm talking to friends, and I catch myself and go, oh, wow, where did that come from? You find that it's just kind of bouncing out. I've definitely found with new people sometimes, if I'm, say, a little bit nervous or I'm meeting new people, I'll sometimes slip into a bit of a ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. But yeah, it's something I think about every day. And if you can't speak, you can't work, You're out of work. There's absolutely nothing you can do. So yeah. And the longer I spend in the industry as well, the more I realize and acknowledge that it's not just your voice. You spend a lot more time marketing and updating and sending cold emails than you do actually working a lot of the time. So that used to be something I was very scared of and tried to shy away from when I first started out. But you can't get work without it. So you got to do the mundane to do all the fun bits too.
The only other question I have on the whole voice thing is, do you find that you need to protect your voice, and that there's any way that you go about protecting your voice to make sure that, you go to a party one night, you're kind of speaking all the time, and then you wake up the next morning needing to work, and all of a sudden your voice is a bit hoarse, or you've lost your voice a little bit, and that's your asset that you're getting paid for?
Yeah, for sure. And one of the most important things is just learning how to, it's going to sound ridiculous, but learning how to breathe properly. It turns out that most people, especially because of the office environments that we work in, the amount that we're kind of hunched over laptops or the amount that we're sitting down, most people fundamentally don't breathe properly through their diaphragm, and they do quite shallow breathing. And that's absolutely terrible for you, both in terms of your vocals, but also your physical health and even your mental health. The deeper you breathe, the more you're able to connect with your body. And it sounded a bit new age when I first heard it, but it's totally true. The better you can breathe, the better connected you are to your body, and the better your mental health will be from it. But in terms of vocal health, yeah, I drink so much water. It's insane how much water I drink. I'm the most hydrated person I think I've ever met. And I've learned a lot about just being hydrated, because it turns out if you want to, say you've got a recording session at 9 a.m. in the morning, you can't just wake up at 8:30 a.m. and just chug some water down. It actually takes a few hours for your vocal cords to get properly hydrated. So if you've got a recording session at 9 a.m., you want to start drinking the night before. And if you really wanted to go full hog, then you'd probably want to wake up about 5 a.m., have a nice big glass of water and go back to sleep again. Because, yeah, it's just something that's round the clock maintenance. So I do be careful about, say if I've got a big recording session the next day, I probably wouldn't be drinking alcohol, for example, a couple of days before that. I might not be having chocolate, I might not be having caffeine or butter, all these little things that affect the quality of your voice. I mean, it's summer right now, and I have awful hay fever. So I've even got to be careful about how much time I spend outside if I haven't taken antihistamine, because a little bit of sneezing can completely send me sideways for a couple of days.
Yeah, all these things that you have no idea, and then you wake up feeling hoarse the next day and you have no idea what's going on. Yeah, fascinating. And then you mentioned about the other sides to the job, that it's more than just your voice, it's your ability to market yourself and your ability to get jobs. Obviously, the fact that you're not employed by a company and you're working as a freelancer. Tell us a bit more about the process of how you actually go and find the jobs, how companies get in contact with you, and how you ensure that you don't have you don't run out of work.
Yeah, so there's an absolute myriad of ways that people find work with voiceover. When I first started, there were these, I suppose you'd call them pay-to-play sites, things like Upwork or Voices 123. There's a whole caboodle of them, but these are sites where essentially you upload your stuff and then people can use them to find you, and you can also pitch to them directly. So it's sort of a middleman of sorts. So that's a way that I think a lot of people, especially in the more digital age, and especially since COVID, when there was a massive influx of people picking up voiceover because they're all stuck in their houses and there was no traditional acting work going, that a lot of people went for. And those are really, really interesting, because you have thousands and thousands and thousands of voice actors all on the same platform, all competing for the same jobs. So what ends up inevitably happening is that the clients realize there's a lot more supply than there is demand, and the prices start going down and down and down and down. So there can be a bit of a big race for the bottom mentality across some of these websites, unfortunately, which makes it hard, obviously, to make a full-time income for them. So then you've got to start thinking, well, how else do I make money? So you can get an agent, a voiceover agent, and they will put you forward for jobs that you wouldn't necessarily normally have access to as a self-represented voiceover artist. So things like big AAA blockbuster video games, or something like, well, national commercials, for really big brands that are going to be televised all across the country. So agents can help you get those really high-paid jobs. But most people I know that have a voiceover agent, I believe their agent normally represents about 30 to 40% of their income. So even with an agent by your side, you've got to do a lot of the work yourself. I have a website that I'm updating at the moment, nathanchatelliervo.com, and that's a great sort of a CV for a voiceover artist to have that you can send out to people saying, hey, check out my website. Here are my demos. You can listen to them, see what kind of stuff I can do. It's essentially your work experience. So then a lot of it, which I'm getting more into at the moment, is cold emailing, which is something I never thought I would be doing when I started a career in the creative industry. And it's an art I'm trying to learn. I remember when I was at university setting up events for theatre companies, I once sent this email to this guy around this market saying, hello, can I use your market for an evening for this play? And it was like 3,000 words long. And he replied to it and just said, yes, we should talk, big email. And, that was a big lesson in why you shouldn't have such long emails and why you need to be concise and to the point. So that's something I'm branching into at the moment, is tracking down companies, figuring out what I can offer them, what they might be missing, which I can offer, and keeping it short and to the point so they don't just open it and go, oh my God, and then close it again. So many ways. And a big one I'm getting now that I've been doing it for about 5 years is word of mouth. I'll have clients going, hi, blah, 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 I'm X and Y. You worked with X and Y and they passed me on to you. So I'm definitely feeling the longer I'm here, the more my tendrils are kind of seeping into the industry and working their way around, which is a nice feeling to have.
Now, I guess that's a credit to you for all of the hard work and cold emailing you've done, right? Where have you got to now in terms of some of the jobs you're working that you told us and mentioned briefly at the beginning sound very exciting? Are you able to tell us some of the more exciting jobs you've done and maybe any good stories that have come out of some of the projects you're working on?
Yeah, I've done sorts of fun bits and bobs. There's a video game, I'm not sure when it's coming out, maybe this year or next year, called VED on Steam, which I did a few voices for, and that was really fun because I think I did about 12 or 13 characters on that. So I was there scratching my head for different accents and pitches and voices. I did the original Mean Girls coming to the West End in London.
Wow.
And I voiced the original trailer for that, which came out a few months ago, which was pretty fun because I sent it off and completely forgot about it. And then I got a marketing email a few weeks later saying, Mean Girls coming to the West End, check it out. And I clicked on their little video, which you can find on YouTube. And then at the end, my voice came up and I went, what? And God, I did do that. And I had friends sort of texting me going, is that you on the Mean Girls ad? I was like, yeah. So those are quite fun things. I enjoy doing projects which people I know connect with and get to know about. That's always a fun thing. Because when you're by yourself in the booth a lot, you kind of wonder, where's all this audio going? Who's listening to it? So those are some of my favorite things when I get to share the experience with friends. But I've done some other funny stuff too over the years. I've dipped into werewolf fantasy, which had slight adult themes. My friends have been trying to find that for years, but no one successfully found it. Yeah, I did it under a pseudonym. No one's worked it out. So yeah, a lot of my favorite stuff has been character-based stuff because that's often, for me anyway, where you really get to throw your interpretation into the mix. With a character, you really get to craft them from the bottom up, and I really, really enjoy that. And it's just such fun figuring out what kind of characters you'd like to play. Because the characters that I play in voiceover are totally different to the ones I play on stage or on screen. When I do stage work, I often do kind of quite dorky or academic characters, or on the reverse side, sometimes quite intimidating, menacing characters. But that's so influenced by your looks, by your hair color, by your height, by your weight, by so many things that you have no control over whatsoever. But come over to the voiceover industry, and suddenly your looks really have so much less importance. There's still a lot of biases, obviously. There's still structural inequalities in the industry, but you have the opportunity to explore so many different types of work that things like looks would prevent you from doing in more screen or audience-facing pieces of media. So I'm very grateful that I've had the opportunity to just delve into so many different realms. You get to make universes. I did this beautiful audiobook a few years ago called Along the Rivers Ulysses, is I believe its name, on Audible. Just this gorgeous kids fiction book. And I remember getting to the final chapter where you say goodbye to all the characters, and I was doing this kind of gruff Scottish dwarven character, and I remember in the booth just starting to cry while I was saying his last lines in this ridiculous Scottish accent, because I'd just grown so attached to the characters over the months that I'd spent narrating them and getting to know them and feeling them out, So it's such a pleasure to be able to connect to my work so emotionally and so viscerally, and for these characters to have an impact on me when I say goodbye to them. Those are some of the memories that I really treasure.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Such a, like a fascinating insight into how like the actual world works. And I think from the outside of the very, very minimal that I know about it, I guess I made the judgment that you find a niche, you know, if your voice is particularly deep, then you go for all those kind of roles. But then listening to you talk there, and I'd read previously, like you work with the likes of Nestle, Red Cross, Lipton, right? But then there you're talking about playing 12 to 13 characters in a single video game, and then also doing the Mean Girls. So where does the like versatility come from? Is that something you've had to learn and practice to be able to adapt to all these characters? Or is it something that is unique, I guess, and why you're so good at what you do is because you have this versatility?
I reckon acting training is a really big part of it. You know, I
Okay.
did a lot of drama at uni, and then I did about a year and a half of training at IDSA, Identity School of Acting, and I also trained with National Youth Theatre, and I've done, you know, master
Wow.
classes and workshops in the years in between. Just acting training is so important because it lets you form a personal connection with the text and do analysis of the text and find out what's really being said and what really needs to be communicated. And that's so vital to being able to give a truthful performance. Voiceover actors we're all gonna have niches. You know, some people are great at movie trailers, some people are great at video games, but it's good to be able to dip your fingers and toes into all of them. I definitely have a strong preference for video games just because I enjoy it so much. But what I really
Yeah.
enjoy is just the absolute variety of projects that I get to do. You know, I love moving around from thing to thing. I love doing new things. So to me,
Wow.
that's one of the pleasures, is being able to hop from genre to genre and reshape my voice to fit whatever that project requires.
And I love that. It feels that your ability to do that has come from, as you've mentioned a few times, that acting background that you have. So I'd love for you to explain a little bit more about how you actually got to where you are now.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I was a really, really shy kid, actually. Really, really shy. Had a lot of trouble talking to people. So my mum, bless her, got me to do drama for GCSE, which in England is the exams that you do when you're 16. So I did that, and I did the tech. So I was doing like lighting and sound design, but I was always looking at the actors on stage going, that looks fun. So I took it a year later and I went to A level. And the teacher came to me. It was a small class of about 5 or 6 people doing it. He went, "Hey Nathan, there's this Eastern European practitioner called Grotowski, and he does this thing called paw theatre, and it's really cool, and I think you're all going to like it. But there's no tech, and there's no sound, and there's no lighting, and there's no costumes, and there's no anything. It's just the actors on stage. Do you fancy doing some acting?" So then about 2 months later, I was like writhing around on the floor, age 17, in like a loincloth, thinking, "Oh, this is wicked. I'm loving this. You know, if I can do this, I could do anything." So it went from there, and I took it to uni, where I was doing a geography degree. And I just resonated so much more with my time on stage, whether I was stage managing, directing, doing set design, or performing. So I came out of uni and I thought, what's the one thing that made me feel alive and connected to myself and the world around me during my time there? And it was acting. So I spent a few years working at a bar and Battersea Arts Centre. Beautiful. So you might know it. I think you're maybe not too far away from Battersea Arts Centre.
Yeah, sure,
Gorgeous,
for sure.
gorgeous theatre space. This massive town hall, and the back half of it was this burnt out building that burned down in the 2010s, and they've rebuilt around the burnt structures, and anyone that lives near it should go see a show there. It's gorgeous. So I worked there in the bar to support myself while I went and did auditions, got agents. You know, I was put up for a few big projects here and there. The Elton John film, I went for the role of a guy called Elton John, but not the Elton John. Apparently Elton John stole his name from a guy called Elton John. So I went up for that guy. You know, little brushes with big projects, and I ended up doing a few little tiny bits on TV. Like I did an episode of Britain's Most Evil Killers, where I played a chap from serial killer from the 90s called John Napper, which was a
Wow.
really, really fun couple of days of shooting. So I was doing bits and bobs, but then COVID hit, and I needed to make money to feed myself. It was a bit of an odd situation because I've been doing a touring pantomime just before the pandemic. So I've been going up and down the country doing Sleeping Beauty, and I was playing Prince Eric and the court jester and a bunny. It was this tiny cast of 4. And every day you'd wake up at 5:30 a.m., arrive to a school, spend an hour building this massive set, perform it for an hour, 5-minute break, perform it for an hour, put it down, go, run to the next school, do it all again, home by 4, absolutely knackered. So I'd just done that for 3 months. And then COVID hit. And I just thought, wow, how do I make money? And I was barely getting any furlough from the place I was working because I'd spent so much time doing this pantomime that I hadn't clocked in many shifts. So I was really running out. So I thought, let's try and make some money off my voice. So I ordered some plastic poles online. I ordered some big blankets, made my first ever booth. And then I think the very first project I did was a 10-minute YouTube video on the digestive system. And then the very second project I did was a 12-hour fantasy audiobook, which was about the craziest first ever project you can realistically take on. So by the time I'd finished that, I thought, okay, well, if I can do that, I can probably have a decent crack at anything. And then, started building up clients and experience from there, really.
That's an amazing story. I think, given the fact that you admitted at the start you were a shy kid, that seems a remarkable journey to have come on now. And just quickly, before we move on to like talking about what's next and the future of your career, do you think that would be your key bit of advice to everybody else, is just to say yes to all of those opportunities?
Yeah, I think throwing yourself in is important. But I think what I've learned for myself personally is that some things are pretty scary. And everyone has unique individual things they're scared by. And it's very easy to take those scary things and rationalize a reason why you don't need to approach it. And something that is quite prevalent in the acting industry is that a lot of the people in the acting industry, myself included, are very, very creative, but they're not necessarily super technical minded. So the idea of maybe cold emailing agents or maybe setting up a website can be a bit intimidating. And what I've certainly found I do is that you find a reason to back away from it. And the reason I found was I decided in my head, well, the acting industry is a wild, irrational beast. If you've got your headshots and you've got your show reel, then you've just got to see what happens. And that attitude led me to not doing a whole lot to promote myself or put myself in positions where I could succeed. Because I was scared.
I love that.
There was something I was scared of, so I created a reason that I didn't have to engage with it. Because I thought, what if I send an email and they hate me? Or what if I send an email and they say no? Or what if I put myself forward for a project and they tell me you're not what we're looking for? You know, there's so much rejection in the acting industry, and we deal with different types of rejection differently. While throwing yourself into things is really important, there's also the risk that you'll just throw yourself into things knowing that there's something on the side that you should probably actually be throwing yourself into. So what I would definitely suggest is find what scares you, sit down with it, and then find out if that thing that scares you is something that realistically, if you really are honest with yourself, that you need to be cracking on with if you're going to be making progress in whatever it is that you're doing. And then if you realize that it is something you need to be cracking on with, find a way to approach it gently and carefully that lets you start making little tiny teeny steps to making it a bit easier for you and a bit more approachable.
Amazing. And I saw this quote, which is literally on the lines of that, which is the magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding. I think that's absolutely spot on with what you're saying. And I'd love to know what your plans are for the next 5 or 10 years with that in mind.
Gosh, it's so exciting. It's so hard to think in those time scales, you know. I mean, I'm 28. I think 7 years ago, I was just leaving uni. I can't imagine what life will be like in 5-10 years. You know, AI is becoming such a big thing. AI voices taking over. Just a few months ago, I was working with a regular client, and they sent me this script and said, here's a script for you, and we've made a video for you that should give you an idea of pacing and tempo. So I opened it up, and it was my voice saying words that I'd never said before. You know, so AI voices, just general AI technology is becoming such a big influence. It's really hard to predict where I'll be in a year, let alone 5-10 years. So I know what I would like to do, which is I would love to get a few agents spread across different specialities in the industry. I'd love to get more and more training. I'm always getting training, but I'd love to get more training and hone my craft. I love getting better at my craft. I'm always reading acting books. And exploring how I can use those across the different disciplines. And I'd love to be just continuing to support myself and, importantly, having a good work-life balance. because that's something I've really tried to implement for the last few years. You know, when you run your own business, you can work yourself into the ground. So I really try to create a good work-life balance. You know, I try to let myself have a little sleep in. You know, I try to let myself go out to the cinema on a Tuesday afternoon if there's time for it. You know, I try not to work myself like a dog, because if you are, what's the point? You know, what's the point in sacrificing all of that physical health, that mental health, when you could just be doing an office job if you wanted to have someone else telling you to work yourself until you can't stand up anymore. So that's so important for me. No matter how far I get in this industry, I want to maintain that balance, because nothing is more glorious than popping into the cinema to watch a good film on a Tuesday afternoon, knowing all of your mates are at work. There is a good schadenfreude to that.
No, 100%. So just to move on and just ask the final question, basically to go back to, and you can pick the time frame on it, but I think maybe, yeah, whenever you started out on the acting side of things, or whenever you started on the voiceover side of things, when you first got that microphone, we'd be interested to know what is the one thing you would do the same, the one thing you would do differently, and then one thing that you would tell yourself to motivate yourself.
Yeah, great. Yeah, let's go through those one by one. I might need a bit of reminding. So the
No
one
worries.
thing that I do the same, I reckon. You know what? I'm really glad that I went and did bar work for a few years. I think that's one of the best things I could have done, actually, was just getting some actual work experience. Because especially at the space I worked, Battersea Arts Centre, almost everyone there was a creative of some sort at the start of their careers. You know, it's people from all over the UK, even all over the world, coming in, and to be surrounded by so many people, you know, just coming fresh into life, fresh into adulthood, trying to make tracks in their chosen creative path was really, really invigorating. Yeah, do differently. So I think that harkens back to finding things you're scared of. But I think something I lost in the first couple years was trying to remember why I was doing what I was doing. When I first started it, it was for the joy of it. It was because it made me feel alive. But within a couple of years, you're sitting there going, you know, I'm getting something good and then nothing for a few months, and then something good and nothing for a few months. And suddenly you're going into the audition room going, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. Or you're thinking, if I don't do well in this, then my friends will know I'm not doing well, or my family will know I'm not doing well. And you completely lose perspective of why you are there in the first place, which is really easy to do. So I wish if I could go back in time, I wish I could have discovered that sooner and found a way sooner to come back to the reason that I was there in the first place. Because when you find your way back, it's beautiful and everything becomes so much easier. But when you're out there in the wilderness, feeling like you need it, ooh, it's scary. It's not a fun place to be. And I think what I'd probably tell myself, I might get a little bit soppy here, is do it for yourself. Do it because you love yourself. Do it because you only have one life and you deserve to live it fully, and you deserve to do something fulfilling that adds to the world. You know, if you can find something that makes you happy, that supports you, and puts something into the world, that's beautiful. It's something I remind myself of a regular basis. If I'm not having fun, try and find a way to make it fun. There's almost always a way. Yeah. I'm glad I said that. It's a good reminder to myself for the day ahead, actually.
It couldn't have been a better way to end, and definitely a great reminder for Jamie and I as well. So very appreciative of that. Yeah, looking forward again. Thank you so much for your time.
I can't wait to hear it. Can't wait so much,
Yeah.
guys. Absolute pleasure. I can't think of a more bolstering way to start the Monday morning.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, really enjoyed listening to Nathan there. I think just the quality of his voice was kind of calming, but then the stuff he was saying was quite inspiring as well. So hopefully a very easy listen for everyone and a useful listen as well. There's definitely going to be some good takeaways. I can throw out my first one, which I think was echoed throughout the entire episode, to be honest. Just his sheer attention to detail was just insane. Anyone that just thinks being a voiceover artist is down to having a good voice needs to listen to that and think again, because everything that he does, the thought he puts into it, the fact that he's constantly thinking, whether it's on the underground or around his friends, about what he can do for his work, it comes from a place of pure love for what he's doing and enjoyment of it, but also the fact that he's constantly wanting to get better, and that attention to detail is probably why what he's done already in his career is so impressive.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think to double down on the attention to detail, the fact that You know, he's really invested in his surroundings to create like a mini studio in his house and all those sort of things. Like that's the sort of thing that makes you, I guess, to use the cliche quote, world class at what you're doing, and that's why people pay you money, right? So yeah, fascinating to see how much he was actually investing in that world. Yeah, enjoyed that. Second from me would be almost on the kind of what you were saying is he clearly has realised that yes, he's got to have an amazing voice, but there's so much more to actually making a career out of it. And he kept speaking about cold emailing, marketing, and being realistic about the fact that you could have a good voice, but if you don't do the hard work on the side to actually promote yourself, and you know, there's not going to be as much benefit, and you might not even be able to make a career out of it. So I loved hearing about the like getting over the fear that he spoke about actually reaching out and cold emailing and promoting himself, which I think is necessary in so many, especially freelancer roles where you're kind of paving your own way.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was a very important thing. Again, it links to what I said with the first key takeaway, doesn't it? Like it's the attention to detail. It's not just having a good voice. You know, he's having to do everything else proactively, and I think that probably links quite well to my final point, which goes to being a freelancer as well. And it's something that I've struggled with over the last couple of years, but is a great example with the career that he's doing because his personal health and particularly his voice health is so important to him. Is the whole way that he manages his work-life balance as a freelancer. He admitted that it would be so easy because he's in a lonely role and he's the main guy fending for himself. He could easily run himself into the ground. But actually, if he did that, his voice would suffer. Like I could get a cold when I'm doing something, but I could still join a Zoom call and still carry on with my work. He could get a cold and it ruins everything he's doing as part of his work. So I think it's a really like poignant example of why you should actually just take care of yourself as well, even if you are down a path less chosen, which is a freelance one where you're having to battle to bring in income every single month. Actually take care of yourself first, otherwise the rest of your work might go to pot.
Spot on. Yeah, nothing to add on that. Clearly a very, very important factor of his career and also a very underappreciated factor of many, many other people's careers. Okay, so to sum that up, we have attention to detail. We have being realistic about the sort of hard things you need to do to push a freelancer career. And then the third one is taking care of yourself first and foremost before anything else. Yeah, great episode, Jamie. Enjoyed getting him on. I don't know if you've got any closing thoughts.
No, I think, he probably mentioned it at the end as well. But if you want to check out some of the cool work he's doing, and he's working on some very good projects, then definitely visit his website. And yeah, we know where we'll be going if we ever need a trailer with a narrator on it for our voiceovers. So yeah, no, very good. Thank you for organising it. And if people enjoyed it, obviously please do the sharing with people that you also might find interesting and engage with the relevant social medias. And hopefully we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, catch you then.